You say you want her to miss you, but you're out here texting her, "Good morning, good afternoon, good night." And don't forget those random, "just thinking about you" texts sprinkled in between. Fellas, let's be real. How's she supposed to miss you if you never actually leave? She doesn't even have time to wonder where you are, because you've made yourself her personal narrator for the day. Every hour, on the hour. The truth is, attraction doesn't grow when you're constantly in her face. It grows in the spaces where you used to be. When you pull back, not in a manipulative way, but because you actually have a life, something wild happens. She starts thinking about you, wondering, craving. That's the gift you give her when you let her miss you. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly why this works, how to do it without playing games, and why absence really does make the heart grow fonder when you do it right. Let's get into it. Number 1, the space that whispers your name. When you step back, something interesting happens. Her world gets quieter, but in that silence, your name starts to echo. See, most men are afraid of silence. They rush to fill it with texts, calls, constant presence, thinking that the more they show up, the more valuable they become. But that's not how desire works. True value is often felt most in absence, not presence. When you give her the gift of missing you, you let that silence do the talking for you. Every joke you told, every random moment you shared, they replay louder in her mind because you're no longer there to keep feeding her attention. That quiet space you leave behind isn't emptiness. It's a stage where every memory of you gets to perform. The way you made her laugh, the way you looked at her when she wasn't watching, all of that gains weight when you're not there to compete with it. Think about it. Even the Stoics understood the power of space and silence. Marcus Aurelius reminds us that we don't control how others think of us, but we do control how we show up. And sometimes, choosing not to show up at all is the most powerful move you can make. It's not about manipulation. It's about giving her room to feel your absence and realize what it feels like to be without you. Only in your silence can she fully appreciate your presence. A high-value man doesn't beg to be remembered. He doesn't chase or cling. He becomes the kind of man whose presence lingers, not because he forces it, but because of the impact he made when he was there. Like the calm after a storm, you're not trying to convince her to miss you. You simply become the man whose energy leaves an imprint, one she can't help but notice when the noise of daily life fades away. The beauty of giving her the gift of missing you is that it's rooted in confidence, not fear. You're not stepping back because you're afraid of rejection or trying to play games. You step back because you know your worth isn't tied to constant access. And when you move with that kind of quiet confidence, it's unforgettable. Missing you isn't something you demand. It's something you inspire. By being a man who brings so much value, presence, and energy into her life that your absence leaves a space nothing else can fill. That's the gift. And the more she sits with that silence, the louder your name becomes. Number 2, the echo effect. See, memories are strange. They're not like a security camera rolling back perfect footage of every moment you spent together. That's not how the human mind works, especially when emotions are involved. When you give her the gift of missing you, something fascinating happens. Her mind doesn't just remember you, it starts editing you. She doesn't replay the ordinary moments. She replays the moments that made her feel something. The way you leaned in close when you were telling her a story. The way you laughed at her jokes like no one else ever did. The way you made her feel safe without even trying. Those little things, the ones that seemed small at the time, suddenly become the highlights. It's like her mind takes a highlighter to your best moments and leaves everything else in the background. And here's where Stoicism offers us some insight. Epictetus said, "It's not the events themselves that disturb us, but how we interpret them." The same applies here. It's not just what you did that matters, it's how she interprets those moments when you're gone. And absence has a funny way of making those interpretations softer, warmer, more golden. It's human nature. We polish the memories of things we miss. That's why constantly being there, constantly texting, constantly showing up, it robs her of the chance to miss you. It doesn't give her the space to create that highlight reel in her mind, to start interpreting you as something rare, something special. When you step back, you're not just giving her silence. You're giving her imagination room to work, to replay, to romanticize. And the magic happens right there, in that space where logic fades and emotions take over. When you're always available, you're just reality. But when you're absent, you become a story, a feeling, a memory that she starts to wonder if she'll ever feel again. That's the gift. People long for what they can't fully hold on to. They crave what feels just out of reach. By giving her the space to miss you, you become more than a man. You become a presence in her mind, one that echoes louder the longer you're gone. That's the power of absence, and it's a power most men are too afraid to use. But a man who knows his value, a man who trusts in the impact he's already made, he doesn't fear stepping back, because he knows that if he's truly unforgettable, her mind will do all the work for him. If you're finding value in these insights, I encourage you to pause and reflect on the power of presence and absence in your own experiences. How have you felt about someone who gave you the space to miss them? Did their absence make your heart grow fonder, or did it help you realize something else? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Take a moment to hit the like button if you agree with what we've discussed. Leave a comment sharing your own experiences, or simply type, "Absence makes the heart grow fonder," to let us know you're resonating with the message. Now, let's continue. Number 3, scarcity awakens desire. What's rare becomes valuable. That's not some dating trick, that's just human nature. And it applies to everything, from luxury goods to personal attention. Think about it. When something's always within reach, it's easy to overlook. But the moment it becomes scarce, the moment it feels like it could slip through your fingers, it suddenly becomes 10 times more desirable. The same thing happens when you give her the gift of missing you. When you stop being constantly available, when your attention isn't something she can collect like loose change, that's when she starts to feel it, the shift. She realizes your time, your energy, even just hearing from you. None of it is guaranteed. And that's where desire begins to wake up. See, a man with real self-respect doesn't hand out his presence like free samples at a grocery store. He doesn't need to prove his worth by always showing up, always checking in, always making himself available just to be chosen. No, he knows his value, and because of that, he understands that his time is precious. He protects it, and the more selective he becomes with who gets access to it, the more attractive that access becomes. Stoicism reminds us of something powerful here. You can't control how someone else values you, but you can always control how you value yourself. When you move like a man who respects his own time, his own peace, his own path, you naturally become more valuable in her eyes. It's the difference between a rare gem and a pebble you find on the sidewalk. Scarcity awakens desire because it forces her to realize you're not something she can take for granted. And this isn't about playing games or pretending to be busy when you're not. It's about living a life that's already rich and full, with or without her. When you do that, your absence carries weight. It reminds her that your world doesn't revolve around her, and that if she wants a place in your life, she has to earn it. That kind of self-respect, that quiet confidence, it's magnetic. When you give her space to miss you, you're showing her that you're not afraid to walk away from anything that doesn't value you. And that simple act, stepping back, reclaiming your time, showing her you're not afraid to disappear, that's what makes her realize just how much she wants you. Because what's rare isn't just valuable, it's unforgettable. Number 4, the emotional recalibration. Something fascinating happens when you step back, when you remove yourself from being her constant source of comfort and attention. See, without you always there, always answering, always filling that emotional space, her feelings start to shift. And this shift is where the real magic of missing you happens. That sense of comfort she once had, the quiet confidence of knowing you'd always text back, always be available, always show up, it starts to erode. At first, it feels like a glitch, a small discomfort. But over time, that comfort turns into uncertainty. And human nature hates uncertainty, especially when it's tied to someone she once felt secure with. That uncertainty doesn't just sit there quietly. It stirs curiosity. Why isn't he reaching out? What's going on in his world? Is he losing interest? Is someone else catching his attention? That curiosity, when left unanswered, doesn't just fade. It grows into longing. And longing is the birthplace of desire. See, what most men get wrong is they try to force desire. They chase it, pressure it, flood her with attention, thinking that the more they show up, the more she'll feel something. But desire doesn't work that way. It needs space, space to breathe, space to grow, space to surprise her. When you're always present, you don't leave her room to wonder. And wonder is what makes her miss you. This is where the Stoic mindset comes in. A Stoic man doesn't chase or demand emotions from anyone. He knows real influence isn't about forcing feelings. It's about creating the conditions where those feelings have room to surface naturally. Marcus Aurelius reminded us that we can't control the thoughts and emotions of others, only our own actions and choices. When you choose to step back, you're not trying to manipulate her. You're simply allowing her own emotions to recalibrate, to find their balance without your constant input. And here's the beauty of it. When you give her that space, her mind starts filling in the blanks. She remembers the way you made her feel, the sense of security and excitement you brought into her life. But now it's paired with a sense of absence, of uncertainty. That contrast, feeling your presence and then experiencing your absence. It's what makes her start to crave you. This isn't about mind games. It's about understanding that emotional attraction can't be forced. It has to rise on its own. And sometimes the only way for her to realize how much you mean to her is to let her feel what life is like without you. That's the emotional recalibration, the shift from comfort to uncertainty, from certainty to curiosity, from curiosity to longing. The man who understands this doesn't fear silence. He welcomes it, because he knows that in that silence, her heart has room to remember, to miss, and ultimately, to desire. Now, I invite you to share your experiences and insights in the comments below. Whether it's a story of rekindled desire or a lesson learned from giving or receiving space, your input enriches our discussion and helps others see these dynamics in a new light. If this topic strikes a chord with you, consider leaving a comment or simply typing space sparks desire to show your connection with the idea. Let's continue to explore how absence and presence shape our emotional landscapes together. Number 5. The contrast principle. Here's the kicker. Your absence doesn't just make her miss you. It does something even more powerful. It makes her compare you. See, when you give her the gift of missing you, you're not just leaving a gap in her life. You're setting a standard. Every conversation she has with another guy, every dry text she gets, every awkward attempt at humor from someone trying to impress her, they all get measured against the presence you used to bring. And if you carried yourself like a man of value, someone who moved with purpose, confidence, and calm, that contrast works in your favor. Because now, she's not just missing you. She's realizing how rare it is to find someone who made her feel the way you did. That's the power of contrast. When you were there, she didn't have to think about it. But when you're gone, every new interaction gets compared to you. And most of them fall short. This is where a bit of Stoicism comes into play. Epictetus reminds us that it's not external events that shape us, but how we choose to respond to them. You can't control who else steps into her life, but you can control how you've already shown up. When you've set a high standard, you don't need to compete with anyone. Your character, your presence, your energy, your way of handling life, it becomes the measuring stick. And that's not something you have to beg her to remember. It's something she feels over and over every time someone else doesn't measure up. The truth is, most guys are trying too hard, trying to entertain, trying to impress, trying to prove they're worth her attention. But a man who knows his value doesn't need to prove anything. He stands apart naturally without effort, just by being who he is. And that quiet confidence, that ability to let her experience life without you, it creates a contrast no one else can match. And here's the beauty of it. The more space you give her, the sharper that contrast becomes. When you're always there, she can't see it. You blend in. But when you step back, that's when she starts to realize you weren't just another guy. You were the guy who raised her standards, the guy who made her feel something rare, the guy who knew his worth without chasing her validation. That's the power of the contrast principle. And it only works when you have the courage to step back and let her see for herself. Because a man who can't be easily replaced is a man who never had to beg to stay. Number 6, her reflection mirror. But here's something deeper that most men miss. Sometimes what she misses isn't just you. It's who she was when she was with you. That's the part no one really talks about, but it's one of the most powerful pieces of why absence works. See, when you're a man of real value, you do more than just show up and make her laugh. You change the way she sees herself. When she's with you, she feels a little more alive, a little more confident, a little more inspired. Maybe you made her laugh at herself instead of overthinking everything. Maybe you believed in her dreams when she doubted herself. Maybe you made her feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally, like she could open up without fear of judgment. That's the version of herself she starts to crave when you're gone. And here's where it gets interesting. It's not just you she misses, it's the woman she became when she was with you. That's a different kind of longing, one that's much harder to replace. Because any guy can take her to dinner or send her a flirty text. But not every man can make her feel like the best version of herself. That's the mark of a high-value man. He's not just someone she wants. He's someone who makes her want to be better. And those men, they're unforgettable. Because they don't just leave memories. They leave a mirror. A reflection of her at her happiest, most confident, most secure. This is where Stoicism offers some insight. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on how the people we surround ourselves with shape our character. And the same applies in relationships. The energy you bring into her life either lifts her up or pulls her down. A man rooted in his own purpose, calm in his own mind, and sure of his own value, creates a sense of emotional stability that lets her relax into her best self. That kind of presence isn't easily forgotten. So when you step back, when you give her the gift of missing you, what she's really missing is that version of herself. The one who felt safer, happier, and more understood in your presence. And that's why trying too hard, constantly chasing or flooding her with attention doesn't work, because none of that recreates the feeling she's actually craving. The men who leave the deepest mark aren't the ones who beg to be remembered. They're the ones who leave a reflection so powerful. She remembers herself when she was with you. And that memory? That's the kind of gift that lingers long after you're gone. This deeper exploration into emotional dynamics beckons us to consider not just the mechanics of relationships, but the personal transformations that occur within them. Think back to a time when someone's presence in your life made you feel more alive, confident, or inspired. How did their absence affect your perception of yourself? Did you yearn for them, or was it more about longing for who you were with them? If this resonates with you, leave a comment or simply type "Reflections of Self" to indicate how this topic touches you. Your insights not only deepen our conversation, but also help others navigate their own emotional journeys. Let's uncover together the profound impacts our relationships can have on our self-identity. Number 7. The curiosity spiral. Here's where things get really interesting. When you're not constantly updating her with your every move, when you don't give her a front-row seat to every thought, feeling, and moment of your life, something powerful starts to happen. Her mind starts filling in the blanks. Where is he? What's he doing? Why isn't he texting like before? Is something wrong? Is someone else catching his attention? That silence, that absence of information, creates a vacuum, and human nature hates a vacuum. We're wired to crave certainty, to want answers, especially when emotions are involved. And if you played your cards right, if you've shown her you're a man worth wondering about, that curiosity doesn't just sit quietly in her mind. It grows. It spirals. See, curiosity isn't just about information. It's about investment. The more she wonders, the more time her mind spends on you. And the more time she spends thinking about you, the more emotionally invested she becomes. It's not even about what you're actually doing. It's about the mystery of not knowing. When a man reveals too much, too soon, too often, there's nothing left to wonder about. And without curiosity, desire fades fast. This is where a touch of Stoicism fits perfectly. The ancient Stoics, from Epictetus to Marcus Aurelius, understood the power of restraint, knowing when to act and when to hold back. A wise man doesn't over-explain himself. He doesn't broadcast his every thought, his every step, his every plan. He moves with quiet purpose, and that silence, that subtle mystery, it draws people in. It's the same in relationships. A man who can step back and leave some of his life behind the curtain, not in a manipulative way, but because he's genuinely busy living his life, becomes infinitely more attractive than the man who's always oversharing, always available, always easy to predict. When you give her the gift of missing you, you're also giving her the gift of wonder. You become the man she can't quite figure out, the man whose story she only knows part of. And the part she doesn't know, becomes irresistible. Mystery sparks curiosity. Curiosity turns into obsession. Obsession, if you've handled yourself with strength and purpose, turns into desire. Not because you played games, but because you had the self-control to let her wonder. A high-value man doesn't explain every step. He's not a book you can skim in one sitting. He's a story worth discovering, slowly, page by page. And those are the stories that stick with her long after the final chapter. Number 8. The revaluation process. Here's the part most men overlook. When you pull back, when you create that space, you're not just giving her time to miss you. You're forcing her to ask herself the hard questions. And that's powerful. Was she too comfortable? Did she take you for granted? Did she get lazy because she knew, no matter how she acted, you'd always be there, always available, always ready to chase her, even if she pushed you away? See, distance doesn't just create longing, it creates reflection. And reflection is uncomfortable. When you were always there, she didn't have to think too deeply about what you meant to her. You were part of her routine. But the second you step back, her mind can't help but run the inventory. Who was he really? What role did he play in my life? Did I appreciate him the way I should have? That space you gave her, that silence, it forces her to confront those questions. And this is where the mindset of a Stoic man sets you apart. A Stoic doesn't fear space or silence. He doesn't cling to constant validation. Why? Because space reveals the truth. Either she values you or she doesn't. Either she realizes your worth or she doesn't. And either answer serves you. If she values you, the distance makes her see it clearly. She starts to appreciate what you brought to her life, and her desire grows. If she doesn't, then you've saved yourself from wasting more time chasing someone who was never fully invested. Both outcomes benefit you, because a man who values himself doesn't fear losing someone who didn't value him back. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to see things as they are, not how you want them to be. And that's exactly what this space does. It strips away the noise, the comfort, the habits, and it forces her to see you and the relationship exactly for what it was. No illusions, no distractions, just truth. That's why high-value men don't chase when a woman starts pulling back. They step back even further, not to punish her, but to give her the space to revalue them. And in that revaluation, she either steps up or fades away. Either way, you win. Because the man who respects himself enough to become rare will always find himself with people who value him. And the ones who don't? They were never meant to hold on to you in the first place. Number 9. The emotional pendulum swing. Here's what most men completely miss. Emotions are never static. They're not stuck in place like a rock. They swing like a pendulum. And the moment you disappear, that pendulum starts moving, back and forth, between confidence and fear. At first, she might feel certain you'll reach out. After all, you always did before. That comfort, that security, it's still lingering. But when the hours turn into days, and the days into even more silence, that confidence starts to crack. What if you're not coming back? What if you're losing interest? What if, and this is the thought that really stings, what if someone else has your attention now? That swing between comfort and uncertainty, it's uncomfortable, even for the most confident woman. And the human mind doesn't handle uncertainty well. It craves resolution. It wants to close the gap, to know where things stand. And that craving? That's where attachment is born. Because the more emotional energy she spends trying to figure you out, the more emotionally invested she becomes. See, this is where most men go wrong. They think attraction is about constantly feeding her attention, always proving their interest, always reassuring her that they're there. But when you do that, you're not sparking desire. You're removing all the emotional tension. And without that tension, there's no curiosity, no longing, no excitement. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus often reminded his students that you can't control another person's emotions, only your own actions. That's the mindset shift. You're not trying to manipulate her feelings, you're simply creating the conditions where her own emotions surface naturally. Your silence isn't a game, it's a space. And in that space, her mind does all the work. One day, she's confident you'll reach out. The next day, she's anxious you've moved on. That swing, from certainty to fear and back again, creates a gravitational pull. The more she feels it, the more important you become in her emotional world. And the beauty of it? You didn't have to say a word. A high-value man doesn't need to control her emotions to hold her attention. He knows that the power isn't in chasing, convincing, or overwhelming her with affection. The real power is in being strong enough to step back, creating just enough mystery, just enough uncertainty, that her own emotions pull her toward you. That's what happens when you give her the gift of missing you. You're not controlling her. You're letting her discover, on her own, just how much you meant to her all along. Number 10. The silent respect builder. Let's get one thing clear. Pulling back isn't a game. It's not some cheap tactic to make her chase. It's a declaration of self-respect. And that's something most men don't even realize they're missing. See, when you give her the gift of missing you, you're not just giving her space to feel your absence. You're showing her exactly how much you value yourself. A man who knows his worth, who's rooted in his own sense of value, doesn't need to beg for attention. He doesn't need to be in her face 24/7, reminding her that he exists. His presence spoke for itself when he was there, and his silence speaks even louder when he's gone. That quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't need to explain itself, doesn't need to justify itself. It earns more respect than any long, emotional speech ever could. Women respect men who respect themselves. It's that simple. When you step back, not out of anger, not to punish her, but because you refuse to overstay where you're not fully valued, that's a move of strength. And strength, even in silence, commands respect. This is where Stoicism offers a crucial insight. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to focus only on what he could control: his actions, his mindset, his character. A Stoic man doesn't chase external validation because he knows respect isn't something you demand. It's something you embody. The way you carry yourself, the way you guard your time and energy, the way you quietly walk away from situations where you're not appreciated, all of that teaches people how to treat you. And make no mistake, women notice. They notice the man who needs her attention to feel secure versus the man who's perfectly secure on his own. They notice the man who's willing to overextend himself versus the man who walks away with dignity. One inspires pity, the other inspires respect. So when you pull back, you're not playing hard to get. You're communicating without saying a word, that you're the kind of man who values his own peace, his own time, and his own worth more than empty validation. And that kind of self-respect is rare, which is exactly why it's attractive. A man who honors his own time teaches others to do the same. And a woman who respects you? That's the foundation for everything. Attraction, desire, connection. Without respect, nothing else lasts. And that respect is built, not through words, but through the quiet power of your actions. That's the real gift of missing you. It's not just about making her miss your presence. It's about making her respect the man who had the courage to step back in the first place. Number 11, the return of the prodigal presence. And here's the beauty of it. If you do return, if you even decide to, you're no longer just the guy she remembers. You're something bigger. You're the man who made her miss you, wonder about you, crave you, and in the process, grow because of you. That kind of return carries weight. See, absence isn't just about making someone long for you. It's about creating space where both of you can see things more clearly. Space forces reflection. It pulls her out of the comfort zone where she assumed you'd always be there, and it replaces that comfort with curiosity, uncertainty, even longing. And by the time you step back into her life, if you choose to, you're no longer just the man who was always there. You're the man she had to live without. That contrast rewrites the entire story. Life moves in cycles: presence, absence, gain, loss. Most men panic during the absence, afraid that distance means disinterest, that silence equals the end. But a man with a Stoic mindset understands something deeper. Life flows in seasons. Sometimes you're there, sometimes you're gone. Sometimes you're close, sometimes you're distant. And a man who embraces that natural ebb and flow never fears distance. He knows that absence can be one of his greatest tools. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on how nothing lasts forever. Not pain, not pleasure, not presence. Everything is in motion. A Stoic man doesn't cling to every moment, desperate to preserve it. He moves with the natural rhythm of life, understanding that what's truly valuable doesn't need to be forced. It can withstand space. In fact, space magnifies it. That's why the man who respects his own time, who's unafraid to step back and live his own life, always returns stronger. Not because he changed who he was, but because his absence gave her the chance to reevaluate who he is. And if you handled yourself with grace, strength, and purpose during that time apart, you don't return as the guy she remembers. You return as the man she realized she can't replace. The real gift of giving her space isn't just making her miss you. It's giving her the chance to grow, to see what life is like without you, and to understand for herself what you actually brought to her world. That way, if you come back, it's not out of desperation. It's out of clarity, because a man who understands the power of presence and absence doesn't chase love. He creates conditions where it can breathe, grow, and return, stronger than before. And that's how you turn absence into an advantage, and yourself into the kind of man she never forgets. We've talked a lot today about the surprising power of stepping back, of letting that space between you and her become a canvas where her memories paint you in vivid, longing strokes. We've uncovered how this seemingly simple act is not about playing games, but about understanding the deeper dynamics of human connection and desire anchored in the timeless wisdom of Stoicism. So, if you found this exploration into the gift of missing you enlightening, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment below. Share your thoughts or experiences about giving space in relationships. How did it change the dynamics for you? And if you're new here, consider subscribing for more insights like these. Before you go, make sure to check out the recommended videos on screen for more guidance on building meaningful connections using Stoic principles. Your engagement helps us grow and continue providing valuable content that makes a real difference. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most impactful presence is felt in absence.